Good afternoon, and welcome to Grace Covenant Presbyterian Church in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm Marcia Mount-Shoup, the pastor, head of staff at GCPC, and I welcome you to an event we are deeply grateful to host, Healing Families, Exploring Trauma-Informed and Trauma-Responsive Parenting, with Michael Hayes, Alice Dixson, and Allison Sturtevant-Gilliam. It goes without saying that 2020 has been a difficult year for children and their families. COVID-19 has been a life disruption on every level of our lives. Going to school, going to church, playing with friends, playing sports, just moving and even breathing. All of those things have been altered by the virus that has taken far too many lives around the world. That's the definition of trauma. A life-disrupting experience that seeps deep into our bodies and our habits of being and thinking and doing. Trauma changes the way we think, the way we feel, the way we remember. It changes the way our bodies and relationships function. And trauma can have lifelong diminishing effects when it's not met with support that's trauma-informed and trauma-responsive. And the reality is that the deep and life-disrupting impacts of trauma for so many children and families have been doing harm way before COVID-19 came along. Trauma can also be a perpetual state of not feeling you can trust your surroundings, not knowing what's going to happen next, being afraid of what's going to happen next, not being able to rely on resources to be there when you need them the most. The weathering that comes from this kind of stress can have traumatic impacts. Racism is trauma for Black, Indigenous people of color. The violence and oppression of white supremacy is everyday and repeated trauma for BIPOC children all over America. The stress and strain of experiencing homelessness and poverty are trauma for many children and families in America as well. And in Asheville-Buncombe County, the impacts of these layers of generational trauma diminish lives and relationships and communities. It is critical that we all learn and grow in our abilities and capacities to respond to the way trauma lives in bodies and systems and communities. This is why this event is such a gift to our community. Our speakers can help us. They can help us get better at being present in the realities and impacts of trauma in our children's bodies, in our family systems, in our school systems, and in our communities. Today's presentation may bring up some things for you, for all of us, for any of us as human beings. Just know that there is a supportive space to connect to after this presentation with our speakers. I am honored to introduce our outstanding speakers for today, Michael Hayes, Alice Dixson, and Allison Sturtevant-Gilliam, three people who provide support and wisdom and skill building in all of these spaces we've mentioned so far. After their presentations this afternoon, we'll have 2 Zoom rooms open for question and answer with our speakers. Those connections will appear in the YouTube chat toward the end of the presentation. One Zoom room is available for those who understand themselves as parenting in conditions of oppression. And one Zoom room is available for those who understand themselves as parenting in conditions of privilege. Throughout this presentation, please feel free to use the YouTube chat for questions, thoughts, or anything that comes up for you. I want to introduce our speakers. Michael Hayes. Michael is Executive Director of Umoja Health, Wellness, and Justice Collective. He's a certified peer support specialist, a wellness recovery action plan facilitator, and a Reconnect for Resilient Skills educator. Michael is founder of the Urban Arts Institute, and he comes to the work of adversity and resiliency after learning about the ACE study while in prison, a turning point that changed Michael's life and helped him to put context to his experiences. With the lessons learned in Michael's own life and from the experiences of the community, he became motivated to start the Umoja Health, Wellness, and Justice Collective, a place for connections to center the healing and resilience with the Black community. Through trauma-informed practice, building community connections, and recognition that what we've been through motivates us to heal, Michael hopes that we can become a resilient community. And Alice Dixson. Alice is a certified peer support specialist, a community and spiritual activist, a body worker, a generational elder, and a long line of civil rights activists. Alice is the executive assistant at Umoja Health, Wellness, and Justice Collective, and she's worked with the juvenile justice system as a member of the ACE Learning Collaborative. She's a board member of Be Present, a racial equity facilitator at a number of venues, including the annual Southeast and New England Herbal Conferences and Earth Haven Eco Village. Alice is a consultant for the Reconnect for Resilience training curriculum, and her passion for equity and healing shows up with compassion in all aspects of her work and for all people. And Allison Sturtevant-Gilliam. Allison is a white, able-bodied mother of 5 children, currently working to disrupt systems of oppression in the world of parenting. She's a social worker, and Allison believes that understanding natural responses to stress and trauma, as well as the importance of connection, are the key to parenting in a way that feels good for everyone involved. So I welcome you to all who are joining us today on YouTube, and I welcome you, Michael, Hayes, Alice Dixson, and Allison Sturtevant-Gilliam.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Just before we start, I just want to make sure we all know what Umoja means. Umoja is Swahili for unity. And here at Umoja, we believe in creating connection through community, through connection. We create a community through connection and culture. So we decided to actually do this presentation here at Umoja, being that we're all a part of this great work. So I'd like to welcome everyone. Would anybody else like to say welcoming?
We want to thank Grace Covenant for making this possible, for their partnership in bringing this event today. So thank you very much for that. We think it's important information. We're glad to be able to connect with folks to share.
And I'd like to say, thanks for the opportunity for us to be able to get some of this information out there. I think is very important because families and children are really struggling right now in this age of uncertainty. And for the first time in our lifetimes, these are the most uncertain times we've ever faced.
Thank you for recognizing that, Alice.
All right, we want to jump into slides.
All right, let's do it.
All right, we'll jump into behaviors. We all know that kids have a lot of different kinds of behaviors. And parenting is super important. And one key part of parenting is shaping children's behaviors. So in order to shape those behaviors, we have to know what they are and where they come from. And in hard times, especially like COVID, in transitions, the everyday, in huge oppressive situations like parenting with racism and economic oppression, we know that we see a range of behaviors from kids. And the more difficult the times, the more difficult the behaviors.
I do want to say this. So with behaviors, with the learning of behaviors, that comes with what we call co-regulation. Because our young people, our children start to pick up on, what healthy co-regulation looks like. they also can pick up on what unhealthy co-regulation looks like, so that those behaviors start to stem from how our children start to regulate themselves, which is self-regulation. So babies are, when babies are crying and they need to be soothed, and a mother or father or a parent picks them up, and there's this rubbing and there's this coddling and there's this, kind of rocking back and forth. That is co-regulation. So with that co-regulation, a child will start to sense in on the fact that they're safe. Mm-hmm. So they start to the crying to stop, start hearing, the whole I'm safe sounds with the laughing, and so they start to learn at an early age what a healthy co-regulating looks like. So those behaviors that come actually happens from that, learning how to learning through co-regulation how to self-regulate.
I would like to say that children are very sensitive, and when I was growing up, it used to be the first thing when someone would say children are to be seen and not heard, and people would talk to their kids about how they should act, but children are going to do what they see done. And if they see a parent or an adult offline and can't seem to settle themselves down or totally dysregulated, they're going to pick up on that, and they're going to start showing those same behaviors. So behavior has great meaning. It really does have great meaning.
So behavior is how we get our needs met in the world. It's a language that we express to the people around us about what we're feeling on the inside, what our bodies are experiencing in the world. We see that on the outside through behavior. So today we hope to look at parenting from that lens of behaviors are trying to tell us something. And when we give children the tools to figure things out and to get their needs met on their own, they will do that in a way that feels good for the majority of us. And when kids don't have that, for lots of different reasons, we see behaviors that are more difficult. So if you'll move to the next slide, please.
That's me. Okay. Okay. When words don't work, it's when children get to a point where they don't know how to explain what's going on in their bodies. They don't know how to explain their frustrations. They don't have the words. When they're really young, they don't have the words. They cry. They melt down. We've all seen a child melt down, and trying to understand why they're melting down can be very challenging and difficult. I also do understand that when children watch adults melt down, they feel like, okay, that's what you're supposed to do to get some attention. So
that's that unhealthy co-regulation.
Yeah. And so when children act out, there's a reason behind them acting out. It's not because they just want to, but there is something going on inside that they don't know how to express. They haven't been taught how to express. So it comes out in can come out in destructive ways.
But their body knows how to. Their body will react in a way because their brain is something to act a certain way. For instance, my 8-year-old, at 7 years old, he used to have the days that he had to read in school. He would go through these stomach aches. Mm-hmm. All right, so he would wake up in the morning because he knew he had to read that day in school, and he'd wake up, oh, Daddy, my stomach hurts. Now, at first, just being the parent, like, oh, come on, dude, you're not going to play sick. You're going to school. But then I started to learn that his body was like his brain was telling him that he was feeling unsafe because he had some type of situation happen when he read in front of the class before. So now his body is responding to the thought that he has to read in front of the class, so he's having these stomach aches. So the behavior is so we're going to talk about somatic experiences a lot with this presentation. But the behavior that showed when his stomach was hurting was, if I didn't believe him, then he would get upset and he would act out in ways that kind of seemed kind of irrational. But then when I started to understand that his body, was just having a traumatic response because his stomach was hurting, because he knew he had to read in front of the class, I had to come to the point to understand, like, okay, how can I get my son, we're going to talk about this in the presentation, how can I get my son back online? Yeah. Okay, because he was having a traumatic response, he was offline, his body was telling him that something was wrong, and he was feeling it in this place in his stomach. And in his stomach, we'll know that's where that shutdown place is, that it happens in the gut feeling. So, behaviors are kind of instigated by sensations. And then we understand that in order to kind of, correct the behaviors when they seem inappropriate, the first thing we have to do is connect. And we only connect through the language of sensations. So we're going to talk about what sensations are.
So when you see behaviors that don't feel good to you, we might call those bad behaviors. We might call them difficult. Mm-hmm. We have all sorts of ways to categorizing behaviors. But when you see behaviors that are beyond what you would expect, bigger or more shut down than what you expect, what the science tells us, what research tells us, is that something is going on inside the body. And the only thing that's happening is that a child has a need that they cannot meet on their own. It is that simple. And I know we're talking about children, but this applies to grown-ups as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about the grown-ups real quick, because I'm sure some of you guys are sitting there like offline, like, what is going on? Because they're sitting around each other and they are not 6 feet apart and they don't have masks on. That is because we work together all the time. We sanitize our place. We get COVID tested. So it's not like we live together, but we're together just as much as we live together. So we're fine here. We're fine here. And then we didn't want to wear the mask so our words would be muffled today. So we made that agreement. We're all grown. We're all good here. So I know, because some of y'all was probably thinking like, man, they doing wrong. So at that time, you probably like offline, right. If not a whole lot, just a little bit. And because you're offline, okay, your behavior is you act in some type of way. So I'm sharing that to say that children have it even harder because a lot of them don't have words for their sensations. A lot of them don't have words for what they're feeling. So it tends to show in behavior. And if we stop looking at behaviors as what's wrong with you and start looking at behaviors as what happened. Mm-hmm. What happened to you? Right,
or what's happening to you.
Or what's happening to you. Yes, very good.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's what's happening to you. Because if we could all go back and remember everything traumatic that has ever happened to you, you have felt that sensation somewhere in your body. Mm-hmm. So for a kid to have a stomach ache because they know that they have to read in front of the class and it was a horrible feeling when it happened to them, it makes sense.
Yes, it does.
It makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So we're going to talk about what those 5 basic needs are. So if we want to move on. So there's lots of ways to talk about needs. There's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if that makes sense to you, plug and play with what we're going to talk about with Maslow. If there's some other way that you talk about needs, what we mean are the fundamental pieces that make us human and that make our lives full and safe and stable. And William Glasser, so if you're somebody who likes research, you could look at William Glasser's 5 basic needs, and that's what we're going to share with you today. One thing I love about this is it's so simple. Basically, we have these 5 buckets. Everybody has their own set of 5 buckets. There's a bucket for survival needs, a bucket for love and belonging, which means to connect with other people around you, animals, people. We have a power bucket, which is not what we normally think of when we think of power. It means to matter, to have a place in the world, to have purpose, to leave a legacy. That is part of our power bucket. We have a freedom bucket, which is very much about being in control of your life, having choices, being able to move around without restriction. Your creativity is part of your freedom bucket. And then a fun bucket. And I think that especially as parents, we forget that fun is a basic need. We can't live without all of these buckets, at least not a full life. We really only need, air, water, and food to survive. These are the things we need to live a life that feels good. So if we go around with these 5 buckets all day, everything we do, every interaction, every body movement, everything we do places a drop into one of these buckets. So when my kids wake up in the morning and they come sneak in bed and they try to crawl in there and snuggle, that's a lot of drops in the love and belonging bucket. When my 10-year-old wants to tell me about something she learned at school or from some video she watched on YouTube, and she goes into all this rich detail about this YouTube channel and building Minecraft, that is for her power bucket, drops in the power bucket. And what happens is when our buckets are full, life is good. We feel good. We can connect with everybody else. Life is good when our buckets are full. When our buckets start to get empty, for so many different reasons, that we will try to fill them ourselves. Now, if I have good enough skills, if I have words, if I'm regulated enough, I can go to Alice and say, I'm having a really hard day, Alice. Can you give me a hug? I really need some love and belonging. And then Alice will hug me and my bucket will get full, right? But for kids especially, but this goes for anybody with a brain, all humans, but focusing on kids don't always have the tools to fill the buckets themselves. And when they don't know how to ask for it in a way that feels good, they'll ask for it in any way that they know how.
Yeah.
So because that bucket has to be full for us to be settled, for us to live life. Oh.
So yeah, I want to bring this point up. So, we talk about these buckets, and if you look at the buckets of freedom and power, I mean, even love and belonging, we're talking about the innate ability for humans to always want to connect. We are intuitively designed for connection. So when some of those drops in the buckets do not exist, or there has to be some type of barrier to explain why this bucket is not possible for a certain group of people, because systems do not allow that, that's when it becomes even harder. So we know that COVID-19 has really brought a lot of things to fruition, but we cannot forget that the racial injustice has also caused a lot of things to come to the head as well. This is not to blame anybody, but this is just to take a look at systems that are designed in order to take away from a child's bucket, or to have it over-explained over and over and over why these certain things do not exist for a child. So if they don't exist, and we know that human beings need all of these things in order for connection to happen and in order to thrive and survive, then some of these things are taken away. What do we expect from our children? Prime example. If I have to have the talk with my 8-year-old and 7-year-old son, if you don't know what the talk is, that's the talk back in the day, the talk used to be sex education talk. Okay. You hit 15, 16 years old, your daddy got to pull you to the side and have a talk. Now, Black fathers and Black mothers, I'm gonna say our mothers and fathers of color, because I'm just finding this out that the same thing happens in our Latinx and Hispanic communities as well. That we have to have the talk to our 7 and 8-year-olds about how to act when they are accosted by the police, when they're stopped, or if they have any interaction with law enforcement. This is not to blame law enforcement, but this is to say that there are systems designed that we have to explain to our children that take away from the basic needs of them being able to connect.
Right. It takes away from their right to be full citizens. Right.
Yes.
And to enjoy all the rights that non-people of color have the right to expect and to enjoy on a day-to-day basis.
And these conversations happen because it's all about survival. So that's when we talk about somatic experiences, it's the opportunity for a child or any human being to feel connected, to feel safe in their environment. But we know that's not the case for children of color, right, for people of color in general.
And sadly, for a long time, we didn't used to have these conversations with our young females. But in this day and age, we have to have the same talk with young women and that we have to have with young men of color, because right at this time it's no difference. The treatment is becoming the same, because young females of color are starting to die at the same rate that young Black men are starting to die, and we're at critical mass.
So this is not for us to kind of misrepresent what this whole presentation is about. It's for us to bring reality to what's going on when we're talking about parenting our children and the behaviors, and how connection has a direct correlation with the behaviors, and how sensations has a direct correlation to behaviors, and how healthy co-regulation has with healthy co-regulation teaches self-regulation, and it has a direct correlation to behaviors. So what we're talking about is the fact that if I have to take away from each part of these buckets, for like security for survival, bonding, especially when we talk about power, okay, self-esteem, confidence, making a difference. When a system is designed to make me feel other than, then how does that build connection? As a matter of fact, it becomes a barrier to connection. When we talk about freedom, having control of one's life. So, and this is not to say that other communities of people do not have it just as bad, because if we look at the LGBTQ AI community, they have it just as bad. If you look at the Hispanic community, they have it just as bad. Royal whites have it just as bad. And I just found this out as well. Some rich white people have it just as bad too. Okay, because there's a lot of trauma that happens, and we found out that with the ACEs study that most of the trauma happens in the household.
Right.
So we have to look at all of that, taken into consideration. What are we taking away from the basic needs that our children need in order to, really, really hone in what connection looks like, what it feels like, and how they can have these healthy connections and healthy, these healthy ways of looking at situations, so behaviors don't show up as difficult or bad, or that's the bad kid, that's the bad group of kids. Those labels that start to get put on our children.
And sadly, in the United States of America, in a lot of situations, and color does not matter, a lot of people in this country do not know what safety feels like. They might know what security looks like as far as a roof over their head, food to eat, but safety inside the home, when you're dealing with people that have erratic behaviors, that's not very safe. That's not very safe.
That's a very good point. A lot of people don't know what it looks like, or what it feels like.
So as a country, we're struggling to figure we need to work this out, because everybody deserves to have the right to feel safety in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the way we feel safety in our lives is that consistently our basic needs get met in ways that are healthy. So one of the things I like to point out here is that our society has some unwritten rules about what is okay and what is not okay to fill these buckets. And for my children, the children that I raise and that all have white skin, that they can laugh in the grocery store, they can be disruptive in the cafeteria by laughing too loud, filling that fun bucket with their friends, being all over each other, moving. Those are things that within the unwritten rules of our world, my white children can fill their need bucket with those actions. And we know that that opportunity is not the same for people who have Black and brown skin, because a certain volume is seen as aggressive. Mm-hmm. So laughter could be seen as rowdy. So the rules for that parents who are raising Black and brown children have to follow to teach their kids to get these needs met within the rules of the system are different.
Yeah.
And it's really important because so we all work within, the child serving system that Department of Social Services, social work, all of that. And what we know is that there are a lot of parenting education programs out there, and they are written, those curriculums, the rules that are proposed, the strategies that are proposed in that are for people who have the privilege of allowing my children to experiment with getting their needs met.
Yeah.
To experiment with, try it on your own and see what happens. For my kids in the grocery store, Alice and I always talk about grocery store examples, that in the grocery store, which is a highly public place where there are very specific rules that are not written about noise levels, about touching things, about touching other people, how close you get. Even now with COVID especially, you're not supposed to get certain distance from people. My kids get to play with that and get to explore and kind of learn from natural consequences.
My kids don't.
Right.
And that's very real. And part of the reason that we wanted to hold this specific conversation today is that I will use different strategies to raise my children than Michael. And that's not okay. And until the system changes, we need to be aware of that so that the expectations for my parenting are not imposed on Michael, and the expectations for Michael's parenting are not imposed on me. Because that is where we get the inequality of judgment around our systems about which parenting modalities are better or right, or, you know, that when we start to hold that standard, when we have a universal standard of parenting in a world where we don't have universal norms, we have big problems. So we just want to put that out there, that the way I teach my kids to meet these needs will be different than people who have different privileges, who are living different oppressions than I do.
What I'll say is that I know Allison's children, and the way she's raising them is phenomenal, because her oldest daughter, Maggie, whenever she sees these injustices amongst her friends, she's like, Mom, no, this happened today, and why is that okay, and why is that not okay? And she questions the system, and I love that about her, because she doesn't let things pass. She will speak up for her friends and ask questions, and if she's not sure, she'll ask me what I think and if it's okay. And I love that, because she wants to know, because she wants the world that her friends live in and she lives in to be different than what she sees on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. And thanks for doing that for her.
Hey, that's my girl.
So those are our basic needs. And when these buckets get low, we start to feel like the world around us is not safe. And so this next slide, we're going to move into explaining what we mean when we say safe.
So safe is when our brain is online and we are in our resilience zone and we feel connected. We have language. We're able to process things. We're able to understand things. And we're going to go through this hand-brain model. So this is what online looks like.
If you move to the next slide.
No, you were good right here.
This one has the circles on it.
Okay, yeah, okay. This is good, right? So this is what online looks like. And if you look at this whole thing that we're going to go through, you'll see where the survival brain is. All right, so if you think about your brain, and okay, I know my hand is way smaller than my head. And don't think of my brain is this small. Okay, my bad. All right. So we're gonna act like this is your brain, okay? So this is your spine, right? This part is your spine. So your survival brain is here on the bottom, okay? And then your emotional brain is here in the middle, okay? All right. Your amygdala is the fire alarm that's always on. It's always scoping everything out to make sure it's your safety and threat alarm. It's scoping out for safety. It's scoping things out for threats. And then you have your thinking brain, all right? So your thinking brain, your emotional brain, your survival brain, okay? And this is what offline looks like. So when people don't feel safe, offline is here. Now we can go to the next one. Okay, so if you're at home and you want to do this with me, please feel free to, okay? I want you to put your hand up, and I want you to circle your survival brain at the base of your neck, the top of your spine right here, okay? That's your survival brain. And that controls mechanical parts and energy flow of the body, keeping you alive. And it's also where your your survival threat system it really starts to get activated if your amygdala says there's some danger. So it controls your automatic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, submit, collapse. All of that is in the survival brain, okay? Right here. All right, now you have your emotional brain. Your emotional brain regulates and expresses emotions, holds memories, relationships, bonding. All of that good stuff is right here in your emotional brain. Did I say thinking? I said thinking. I mean in your emotional brain, all right? So emotional brain, survival brain. This the thing, your amygdala. Now this is a little bitty dot, it's like it's a little P type thing, like right there in the middle of your emotional brain, all right? But we're gonna add, your thumb is the amygdala, okay? Your amygdala is the smoke alarm. It alerts the rest of the body to danger or safety, and it speaks the language of sensation. We're gonna talk about that. It's very important. That's why we're talking about somatic experiences, all right? Amygdala is planted right there in the emotional brain, okay? So your amygdala, emotional brain, survival brain. This is the key element. This part right in front of here, that's your thinking brain, all right? Your thinking brain is problem solving, planning, creativity, beliefs, impulse control, and your thinking brain is normally like this when you are in your resilience zone, when you're connected, when you feel safe and everything is good in the world, you are right here. Thinking brain is online, the amygdala is tucked safely, nothing's going on, survival responses ain't kicking in, everything is lovely. Now, when there's a joke, a stressor, a traumatic event, then the amygdala warns us that there is trouble. And when the amygdala warns us there is trouble, the thinking brain goes offline, okay? And our survival mechanism kicks in, our survival brain kicks in, and it goes into its automatic responses, which is going to be fight, flight, freeze, submit, collapse. What do I mean by that? If I'm having a good day sitting with Allison right here, and a big black grizzly bear busts through the door right now, my amygdala gonna tell me there's danger, okay? And my automatic nervous system, my automatic survival system is gonna tell me what to do. I'm either gonna collapse because they say you play dead, the bear walk over you. Because number one, there's no doors in here, so I'm gonna fight, flight, run. I'm gonna do something, but my survival system is gonna tell me what to do. How is it gonna do that? Well, it reacts to, my amygdala told me there's a problem. Through my memories and all the things that I've taken in through co-regulation and self-regulation, things I learned, that kind of has a play in it. My DNA has something to do with it, but my survival instincts, the automatic nervous system is going to tell me what to do when I'm offline. Now, the main thing about being offline, where it's because your thinking brain is offline. Your thinking brain is not intact. All the blood has rushed from your thinking brain because that bear has come in and it's going to your automatic survival responses and fight or flight. That energy is in the arms and legs, breaking down, submitting, like it's like in the stomach area. But all that energy it's going to tell me what to do. So, and it needs the blood in order for it to. So all the blood is rushed from the thinking brain. So the thinking brain, there's no problem solving going on. There's no creativity going on. That your belief system is thrown out the window, and your impulse control has been thrown out the window. So, what does that mean? If a child is showing up because something has happened and he is offline, he is here offline. Impulse control. There is lack of impulse control. There is no impulse control. So if a child, his behaviors might seem bad or just disproportionate to something that has happened, well, there's no impulse control. There's no problem solving. All he's doing is just reacting. You can't, and there's no language processing. So you trying to talk to the child when the child is like this, sounds like the Charlie Brown school teacher, wah, 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 not understanding anything. And there's no impulse control. So with the child's behavior can be, just from unhealthy co-regulation. I'm just going to use this. The child's behavior might be the urge to break something, the urge to yell out, the urge to lash out. And then because they feel unsafe and the child is here and problem solving and impulse control and release and creativity is not online, then the child reacts some way, and we tend to start thinking that that's the culture or that's just the behavior, that's just the way that child is, when that's not really the case. So what we want to do is really talk about what sensations look like, because the only thing our survival brain understands is the language of sensation. We're not talking about emotions. With every emotion, there might be a sensation with it, but we're talking about sensations. We're talking about the feeling, those somatic experiences that happen because of our, our sensory awareness, or some of the other things we're going to talk about, because what we want to do is let the child understand sensations so the child can get here, and the child is back in their resilience zone. The child is back connected. So now problem solving, planning, creativity, beliefs, impulse control, language processing, all that is back online, and all that is back working. So then we can work on the situation. Then we can talk about, if there was some type of behavior issue, but now we have the language for it. And now we understand that most children, most children, when they get here, they're not offline because they want to be offline. Okay? They're offline because there's a traumatic response. There's a trauma, a jolt, a stressor, or something has happened, and the child might not have the memory of it, but the body remembers. Okay? It might be something. I'm just going to use this as an example. I used to have this traumatic response to slam doors all the time, and I never knew where it stemmed from until I understood that back when I was growing up, we could sometimes tell what kind of mood my father would be in by the way a door closed, be it the car door or the front door, and my body would respond to that. So as I got older, my sons, Mike and DeMarcus, would be running in the hall, and they'd slam doors, and my response was yelling and screaming, and it seemed wildly inappropriate. It seemed like a wildly inappropriate response to my children just really having fun playing and shutting the door and slamming it. But because of my response, I took away some drops from that bucket. I took away the fun. I took away the love and belonging. I took away some freedom because of my response. Now, the way I responded in my traumatic response to my children, now it has traumatized them. Okay? Now, of course, I'm making amends for that. My children are older now, but now I understand why. But I use that example to say that individually, we can be responsible. But as we look at systems, we have systems that do the exact same thing, that have our children showing up like this, be it the school system, the government, be it law enforcement, be it just walking in the grocery store and making too much noise.
Yeah.
All right, you want to talk about autonomic nervous system?
So now we're going to talk about the autonomic nervous system.
One slide ahead.
And your foot is either on the brake pedal or on the gas pedal. And when your foot is on the gas pedal, it gives all your extremities energy. It's like you had blood goes to your arms and your legs for flight, fight, or freeze, collapse, or shut down. So what happens is your survival brain kicks in, and it disperses your blood flow to the things that you're going to need if you're going to survive. So survival is going back to the caveman days. You is going to have to pick up a stick or rock or fight, or you're going to have to run to get away. So that's where all your blood goes, which if all your blood is in your extremities, there's not a lot of blood in your brain to think.
Mm-hmm.
So, your foot is on that gas pedal, and the sad part about that is because of past traumas in your life or that a kid has experienced, even if it's a perceived threat, you automatically go into that mode, even though there's nothing wrong. There's something that has triggered your amygdala to think that there's something not safe. And so the kid's either going to start fighting, run, shut down, or collapse. And then the other Gas, that's about it for gas pedal.
Mhm.
Anything else you guys?
No, that's good for the gas pedal, yeah.
And the brake pedal is when your body slows down, your breathing comes back online, your heart stops beating so fast like it's about to jump out your chest. You actually start to think. Your body functions slow down because when your foot is on the gas, it slows down urination, your heart beats fast, your mind is going a million miles a second, and you're trying to figure out what can I do to survive. But then when the brake pedal comes on and you have gotten away and you feel like you're in a safe space and you've gotten far enough away, everything, your body starts to slow down because you can get some spit in your mouth because when you're scared, it's dried up. But when your body starts coming back online, you get your spit back. Your ability to go to the bathroom comes back.
Because you don't want to have to say, okay, I got to pee while you're running from a bear. I'm just going to go like that.
And in fact, while you're running from the bear, your body might say these couple of ounces might be what's keeping me slowing down. So it might release that while you're running from that bear to offload some weight.
Yes.
Because that system is not working when that gas pedal's down.
So the brake pedal gives your body the chance to start getting regulate itself. So you can start thinking, and actually gives you the opportunity to try to figure out what's going on with you, how to get away, and what you can do to solve whatever is going on at that time, or gives you the opportunity to see if it's a real threat or just a perceived threat.
Because perception is reality when we talk about somatic experiences.
Yeah. Perception is definitely reality into the body. Because when you're a child, or even when you're grown, when something happens to you that's very traumatic, you're gonna feel it in your body. I don't, if I don't care if it's just like intake of breath, a smell in the air, stomach hurt, head hurt, back tense up, muscle tense up. Whenever something traumatic happens to you, you feel it in your body. So the body keeps the score. And so when the brake pedal comes on, it gives your brain the opportunity to say, okay, this is, I'm either safe or this isn't what I thought it was. I can finally take a breath and I can finally slow down and rest.
So as parents, when this happens, we might see our child go through this release of sensations that kind of accompanies when the body gets to a place of like and getting back online. So we might see a release of call of sensation releases that might look that I don't know that sometimes shows up as behavior. Burping, like passing gas or yawning, that's a sensation release after you've been in that amped up space and then you get settled in. Crying is a sensation release. Water in the eyes, that's a sensation release. Shaking, shaking it out, that's a sensation release. And, even though the shaking might take a few, we might see a child that's going through traumatic experience or a stress or a trauma and get here, then the child is rocking. And because they're on virtual learning, then it's like, oh, they're being disruptive. Their behavior is not. No, the child is just really trying to settle the nervous system. The child's nervous system is settled and it's just releasing some of that energy. So, some of those sensation releases might look like behavior.
Yeah. Yes, virtual learning is like really been difficult for kids. It's like they have very good days and good weeks, and sometimes it gets to be a little bit much, and the meltdown comes. And at that point, all you can do is kind of hold them close and tell them it's going to be okay and walk them away from the screen for a while.
Co-regulation. Connection.
So on this next slide, we've been talking a lot about the survival responses. So Couple of things about survival responses. This is from the work of Stephen Porges and Deb Dana. They talk about the polyvagal theory. I just realized our citations are not up, so we'll figure that out. So this idea that when our brains go offline, when our amygdala starts to sense danger in the environment around us, there's only a few options, and these are them. The first option that is available to us when our brain starts to feel the sensations of danger. So our brains are still online, maybe like a little, we start to notice some of that gas pedal energy. Our heart's racing a little bit. Maybe our pupils are dilated. Maybe we're sweating or flushed. We start to get this surge of gas pedal energy. Our first instinct is to look around for who our people are. Where are my people? And we seek out connection. So if you think about, if you've had like a really rough day or a parenting moment that just you bombed, and you call your friend and you're like, whoa, and you kind of verbal vomit all over them about what just happened. And as you're sharing with your friend, it's like the energy is just, you're starting to settle. That's connection. If you think about a little kid who is learning how to walk and they're toddling around and they fall down, even before they cry, they look up and be like, am I all right? Am I okay? And if a parent responds to them with, oh, good job, you fell down, but you can get back up and move again, you're okay. That kid might get up, never cry, and just keep on moving. But if that kid looks around and there ain't nobody around, they may cry because their connection was not available. So when connection is not available to us, either because the people around us are not safe people, because we don't know if the people around us are not safe people, or we're physically alone, our amygdala says, you know what, that connection is not going to be possible, so I'm going to move us into this next kind of step down into the survival responses, and that's fight or flee. And that's full on gas pedal energy in the body, moving us towards the threat, which is fight, or moving us away from the threat, which is flee. So sometimes, that makes sense to us when a kid has picked something up and they're throwing it, or they're screaming, or they're swearing at you. And you see all this energy in their arms and legs. You can tell, okay, that's fight energy. Yeah. But sometimes there's the energy is there, but you don't see all of that behavior. And that's when them's fighting words come out. Like when my kids tell me, I hate you. I wish you were never my mama. Well, you don't do that. You don't say that to Naomi. You don't say that to Lucas. When they start getting that energy, trying to pick a fight with me, that's fight energy from inside their body. Now, the same thing is true about flight. It's running away. It's hiding under a table. It's pulling that, zipper up so you can't see their face anymore, like the girl in the picture. But it's also like, I don't love you anymore. I will never talk to you again. You aren't my mama. Those sorts of things coming out of a kid's mouth is flight energy. It's an offline response. It is a gas pedal response in the body. It is not a choice. It's a reaction. So the amygdala being really quick and fast to decide what is the best strategy. If the amygdala looks around when it starts to notice those danger signals and it says, this threat is way too big for me. There ain't no way I could win a fight. I can't take it. And this threat is way too fast. There's no way I can outrun it. There's no way I could put enough distance between me and what this threat is to make it out alive. We move down even to the lowest step of these survival responses, which is shutdown. Yeah. And what is happening in shutdown is the gas pedal and the brake pedal are both to the floor. And if you've ever been in a car, I remember when I used to drive a stick shift and I would drive an automatic and I'd go slam on the brakes and I would slam both because I was used to having two pedals. The car would not move, right? The car is totally stopped, but the engine is spinning and revving. And that's what's happening in our body during freeze, submit, and collapse. So this survival strategy, this lowest survival strategy, is when the brain does not believe we're going to win the fight or our chances are so slim. So what happens is the body, that gas pedal and brake pedal energy numbs out our body and freeze so that whatever happens, we ain't going to feel it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this is when, if you've ever, I think about back in the day, my people that I know that are in a different generation than me talked a lot about being spanked and not feeling it. Like it just, that was a free survival response to the threat of a spanking, that the body numbs out and you don't feel it in the moment. You might feel it afterwards, but in the moment, you don't feel it. The submit or appease is this survival response. Now, we talk about submit or appease like it's a choice, and I'm not saying that at all. Our bodies react that say, if I let this terrible thing happen, maybe I'll live to see another day.
Yeah.
And we see this in like sexual assault, sexual abuse, domestic violence situations, bullying situations. People use the amygdala, not people, amygdala.
It's not a thinking thing.
Right.
Yeah, your thinking brain is already here. So this your amygdala selecting the strategy that is going to keep you alive.
So if I just let this person take my purse, if I just let this person hit me, if I just let this person do whatever thing, maybe I can stay alive by letting it happen. The numbing effect happens just like in freeze, but the idea is the body is saying, if I can take it long enough to stay alive, that's my goal. And then collapse is when people just shut all the way down. I think about this when my husband cut his thumb on a table saw. Have y'all ever cut a finger on something?
Oh yeah, I cut a finger. I thought you said table saw. No,
it bleeds, right? They bleed really bad. So he ran into the house with part of his thumb missing, and there's just blood everywhere. And it was like he was like, "Oh my God, Allison, call 911!" And he's running around, and that was gas pedal, right? His heart was pumping, his voice was propelled. He was trying to survive, and his body was like, "Dude, you're gonna kill us." So he kind of fell out onto the floor for a minute because had he kept that up, his heart beating, running all around, all of that cortisol, adrenaline, he would have bled out his thumb. But by collapsing to the floor, his body said, okay, we're going to handle this. And his heart rate slowed way down, which meant the blood stopped pumping to his thumb. He got a numbness so that he didn't experience the pain of what was happening. And when he came to, everything in his body had slowed down, so he wasn't going to die by bleeding out of his thumb. So it's a survival mechanism that happens. So these things are the only options available to our amygdala when there's danger. It's that simple. That ain't easy, but it's that simple. And I will say, as a parent, as a human, learning this was probably a moment for me of like every single behavior that I see from someone could fall into one of these categories.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
The when my kid is really sad and they come to me and I hug them, and that's connect. We're resolving that nervous system, that feeling of not being safe through connection by holding one another. I also think that the other day, my 6-year-old, we were all outside and there was this giant spider. And freaked all of us out. But Daddy was there and he smashed the spider. And not 2 seconds after the spider was smashed, our dog, who was on her cord, ran around the 6-year-old and kind of burned the back of his ankles with the cord. So we're all standing around looking at the spider, and Luke starts screaming and starts running. And none of us knew what happened. We thought it was the spider, but then I saw the dog and I was like, well, maybe. So I ran after him, and his little body is just running. And I'm like, buddy, come here. He's like, I can't stop.
Wow.
And he gets to the door and he can't open it. And I'm like, come here. Let me soothe you. Let me hold you and connect with you. But his flight, he was not choosing to run away from me. He would have much rather got on my lap and let me snuggle him in that moment. But his brain said, everybody else is focused on the spider. You're on your own, buddy. You better run away. And that's what his body did. He didn't think about it. He just ran.
Even that response, like, I can't.
Right. He said it as, I'm like, come here. Let me hold you. And he's just said, I can't. And had he been able to open the door at the top of the stairs, he probably would have ran all the way to his bedroom. And that was just him in that moment not feeling safe.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, man. Yeah.
So I think Allison's going to cover this, but this idea that, if you'll move one more slide, the idea that our experiences in our life tell our brain what to expect.
Yeah.
So
And what and our experiences are what wires in our brains. And the more an experience wires in your brain, it develops a strong neural pathway. And until we purposefully do something different on a consistent basis to change that behavior, it stays strong and dominant. But the more that you change, that you practice another behavior, or you learn some new tools and you consistently use those new tools, what wires in your brain fires, and it makes a stronger connection, so you can make better choices and do something different.
I like to think of it as like stories. And, sometimes when you're reading a story, you can predict based on clues at the beginning of the story what might happen next, unless it's a movie like Sixth Sense where nobody figures it out. But the idea that, you have some clues in the beginning of a story that tell you what might happen next, like it prepares you for the next part of the story. That's how our brains are. And sensations are the parts of the story that tell us something bad is going to happen or something good is going to happen. And so our brain starts to, the more we tell it that story by living through an experience over and over again, the stronger that story gets.
And the more lights come on, and the more the light comes on, the more you can see your way through whatever the situation is that you're in, and you can actually change the story. And give it a more positive outcome.
Awesome. So, the next slide, we want to talk about this submit survival response when parenting in a world that isn't safe. So, if you'll go to the next slide. When we talked about the grocery store before, we talked about the fact that my kids can touch things in the grocery store. They can be loud in the grocery store. The rules that they have to follow in the grocery store allow them to experiment, right? And as a parent, I can do all the parenting strategies of making enforceable statements, which might be something like, hey, Luke, I will put you in the cart if you don't stop touching things, right? Or which means that he has a choice to make. Either he could touch something after I say that to him, or he can make a good choice at that point. But the ownership of that choice is on him, because if he chooses to touch one more thing in the store, nothing bad's going to happen to him. Well, except he's going to have to move into the cart, right? Or if my kids are being really loud, I can say things to them like, we use inside voices in the grocery store, and I can try to prompt them to make different decisions.
Right.
And that's the parenting strategies that I'm afforded. I'm allowed to let my kids experience. I can try to build a sensation of trust and try to promote my kids making good choices and allow them to have any consequences if they don't make a choice that's a good one. That is not true for everyone.
Nope.
So what happens in those situations when we don't have room for our kids to mess up, when we don't have room for experimenting or trying your best or letting kids try it on their own and see how it works, because the consequences are so big, we as parents kind of are forced to use shutdown as a parenting technique. And what that means is that if my kid running around a grocery store touching things could result in the police being called or DSS being called just because of the color of your skin or how much money it looks like you live with, because we know that those are real biases that exist in the world, that if that is the story that I live in, the rules that I live in, then I am going to maybe be sharper with my kids. Be like, you better put that down. What did I tell you? You know how we act in the grocery store. I might use shame of, I can't believe you. Why would you be touching stuff in this grocery store? I might have talked to them beforehand and told them all the things that were going to happen if they didn't behave in the grocery store. By doing all of that, I, as a parent, am putting them in a shutdown survival response because I need them to just simply obey for their own safety.
For their own survival.
Yeah.
Right. And that's real.
Yeah.
And that is not bad. It is not wrong for a parent to utilize this strategy in parenting their child if their child running amok in a grocery store could ultimately resolve in physical harm.
Yeah, or wind up with the parent going to jail because of getting into a confrontation with someone that has an opinion that is not the same as theirs.
Or for a parent getting DSS call of them because you're going to, for your child's survival, if you put your hands on something, okay, just for an example, if you act a certain way, if you put your hands on something that you know you're not going to pay for, then I'm going to have to, and because that happens, and I'm just using a black parent, for a black parent, for a parent of color to say, put that down, snatch it out the child's hand, or snatch the child up like you know better than this, or even shame the child, then some people see that as a cultural response and see that as, okay, that is wrong, not understanding that the parent is doing it for the child's survival, not to harm the child, not to abuse the child, but because systems, that's what I'm gonna say, systems, but because systems has said this is, the way that a parent should act and these things, then, we know DSS gets called and we know how, the disparities that go along with that. But parenting is not the same for everyone. And I think that's one of the most important parts you have to understand, especially when it comes to how and why we have to teach our children to freeze, submit, to appease, and collapse.
Yes, yeah.
Why we have to teach that as a survival mode.
Yeah.
And I was referring to that earlier in our discussion. So.
And I think about when even with my privilege, when my reserves are low, I have a expectation that my kids behave differently. When I don't have the ability to give them all of those chances, when I don't have the patience to let them make mistakes, to try to encourage good decisions, when I don't have all that energy, I will use this submit, appease, or freeze for survival response. And in my house, that might look like somebody's making a lot of noise at dinner, and I'd be like, you better stop. We are not doing this here right now. And you guys know what's coming, right? There's gonna be a lot of yelling and slam doors, and people are gonna be putting in their rooms, and it's not gonna be pretty. And my kids, out of a fear-based response of like, oh man, what is she gonna do? Now, my kids have not been abused or neglected by me, but they are wondering, what is she going to do? And then they behave not because they're making a good choice, but because they're scared of what might happen next. And that is a appease survival response. And there's been a lot of memes lately on Facebook about how parents, especially with school coming back, there will be memes that say, like, I never would have gotten away with the behavior that my kids get away with now, or kids in the past never would have talked to teachers this way. And that is because we used to use submit or collapse. We used to fear-based parent all the time. That is what spanking is. That is what very punitive systems are, is that we're teaching our kids to be afraid of adults and to do what they say because they're afraid. We're not teaching them up here with an online brain of how to weigh pros and cons and how to train their bodies to stay online and regulate so that they have positive impulse control. Back in the day, it was all fear-based, all submit, appease. And so...
Yes,
I just keep that crying. I'm going to give you something to cry about. Like, that just came to my mind. Like, oh,
yeah.
God.
Right?
Or the magic number is 3, and you get ready to get the break.
That's real. And so, but we are expecting kids to behave similarly, like to obey their parents, obey authorities, when we're not doing the things that scare them, which is a good thing. But what that means is we have to give kids room to learn the responses that we want to see from them. They're not going to be automatic just because I said so, you're going to do it.
No.
Because in order to get that response, you're going to have to fear-based parent, and we are not recommending that.
Nope. But I do also know that kids do what they see you do. So it's like, I always find it hilarious when people tell their kids, don't do that. But then you sit there and do it, and it's like, I wonder how long this going to last. Because as soon as they get the opportunity, what you told them not to do is what they're going to do.
And that is a learned response down here. Not like, I saw mom do this, so it's allowed. It's like, I don't know how to fill the bucket myself, and I'm offline, and I've seen mom do this, so now I'm going to try it. So that's still an offline response to try to fill one of those 5 buckets.
Once again, instead of healthy co-regulation and unhealthy.
Yeah.
So if we know that kids go into that.
What time are we in? 4:30?
Yep.
Okay, we got 17 minutes.
So
Wow.
when we know that kids move into that bottom step of the survival responses, which is the next slide, we know that sometimes kids are down there. They're in freeze, submit, appease, and collapse. Sometimes we need them to be down there.
Yeah.
But this is a set of stairs.
Yeah.
And you can move up and down the stairs. That's beautiful. And we're going to talk about how do you move back up the stairs. But one thing that we want to know is that if your kid is in a freeze, submit, appease, or collapse response, just like stairs, you can't skip any stairs. They will have to move through fight or flight to get to connection. So that means that gas pedal energy that's been going while the brake is also on is going to have to come out before they can get fully online. So that's why you might see a kid who's been depressed for a long time and not coming out of their rooms, and then all of a sudden they get angry and they're snappy and they're whatever. That's good. It means they're walking back up the stairs, and that's an essential step to getting to the top of connection. So when we not purposefully like from here, but purposefully from like a parenting from here space, put our kids into freeze, we sometimes do that. And what we know is that to get back up the ladder, they're going to have to just get rid of some of that survival energy, that gas pedal energy, before we can connect. So we have to have a plan for that. We have to know that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
All right. And so how do we get back up the ladder, Michael or Alice? Sorry.
How we get back up the stairs?
Oh, the stairs. Sorry. Not a ladder. Stairs.
It doesn't matter. There's the same difference. It's like you climb up and you climb down, and it depends on what's going on in your life, on where you are on the ladder or on the steps, and what's going on around you. But to get back up the steps, you have to start forming. There has to be some kind of connection. I mean, you have to have some, and you have to start working on getting your basic needs met to start going up those steps. And you have to start trying to sense into some kind of safety or create a safe environment. Hopefully, the parents will start creating a safe environment for the children. And so first you have to connect from the freeze, because freeze is really real when you're totally shut down and you're immobile. And you have to start that connection, and hopefully you know your child well enough, and you know the things to do, like rubbing their back or asking them questions about what's going on with them, or explaining why you had to do or say what you had to say to them in a dangerous situation. And meeting basic needs to make sure that they have everything that they need as far as food and water and housing, and safety. And then and it's creating safety. It's letting them know that regardless of what happens, that you're going to be there. You're going to be able to talk about it. You're going to be able to walk them through it. And it doesn't mean that, there's other situations that are going to come up that we might not have to go back down the steps, because that's part of living life. And the only thing constant in life is change, because things constantly change in life. And environment is important. The environment you create for your children is very important.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next one, because this connection. So when we talk about the create a safe enough environment with connection, connection is like, okay, so we come back up those steps, right? And we're at that point. So we talked about those sensory awareness. It's like with connection, besides us like really showing empathy, and I know we all empathize with our children, I'm not going to say we, because sometimes as parents, we think we have all the answers. Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about connection, it's not like we are saying we approve or we accept what our children have, whatever behavior that is shown, and we don't, we disagree with that behavior. It's not us saying, okay, we give in. It's us empathizing, and it makes sense that it's just letting our children know that it makes sense that you would feel the way you feel. That's empathy. The way we show, when we talk about sensory awareness, the way we show up, like the look on our face, the tone of our voice, all right? The look on our, because man, my kids told me like I look crazy because like if I get upset, my eyes get wide. They're like, oh, something wrong with daddy now. But the look on my face, the tone of my voice, me empathizing, me empathizing with my children, not saying that I approve or I accept or I agree with it, but letting them know it makes sense. And that becomes that lets our survival brain and our amygdala know that, okay, we're safe now. And our brain can come back here, and then, because once we're connected, then we can correct. Then we can, let them know how wrong their behavior was, or how in proportion the behavior was to the action or whatever you feel like. But you have to connect before you correct. Period. Mm-hmm. Connection has to happen before you correct.
I always think connection is our first survival response, and once we've moved down the steps of the stairs, we can't initiate connection. So when I'm in fight, all I got for you is fight energy. I can't ask for a hug. I can't ask for a break at that point because I'm down here and every human for themselves. So as the grown-ups, we can't withhold that survival strategy just because let me tell you, sometimes my kids' behaviors, I'm mad at it. I don't want to hug them in that moment. They just swore at me or threw something at me, right? I have, especially the little people, they'll get up in your face and they're, because they got all this gas pedal energy, and it's a, do you need a hug right now moment of, I can see that you're upset. I would be really upset about that too. What can we do together to solve this problem? I think about the other day, my daughter didn't want to unload the dishwasher. She was watching a movie and it was time, and she's 12. So she came upstairs and she was, about the dishwasher, and I could tell that she had a little bit of fight energy. She wasn't offline, but she was trying to start something with me, and I was trying really hard not to start something with her. And she just kept talking about all that she had to do, and I was like, "Girl, are you serious? I got 4 kids. I'm working. Your daddy's working nights. What do you think?" And she was like, "Well, I am." And I was just like, and I had a moment where I said, "You know what? I think I would probably be angry too if somebody called me out of my show to come up and to do a chore. I'm sorry. You still got to do the chore, but what I'm saying is that me comparing it to my life isn't helpful to you right now. So what I'm saying is I see you, and I imagine that sucked, and thank you for doing it anyway." Change the whole thing, right? Like, we could have went at it if we wanted to, real easy, but that turning around of like, yeah, this would, if I was in her shoes, that would not feel good. And I can see that, and I can validate that. And
that's empathy. That is empathy. And then I get this question because as a resiliency educator, I always get this question. Well, what about the discipline? What about the punishment? I'm like, okay, that's all well and fine, but you can't correct until you connect. Until you are here, until you connecting up to where the child is here and the thinking brain, language processing, all that is working. You trying to make a correction where the child here is not doing any good. Matter of fact, it can escalate a situation, but connection, empathizing does not take away from the fact that there has to be some type of, punishment, discipline, or whatever you want to call it. All right. But before we do, we want our children here. And that's where connection comes in, because that's what connection does. It allows us to to connect. And then we're going to talk about sensations here in a minute and why connections are so important to sensations.
And before that, I want to talk about basic needs real quick. I have another story for this, and I have received permission from all of my children to tell these stories, just so you know, because this next one's a little rough. So basic needs, that we know that kids will go offline when one of their buckets is too low. So any one of these buckets being too low could send a kid offline. So my 10-year-old is probably, I would say she's mild-mannered as far as she's not real aggressive. Yes, if she more retreats, she gets more self-deprecating when she's upset. She's not a real fighter. She's more of a fleer usually. So the other day I broke up this fight. I'm working upstairs and I hear this screaming between the 10-year-old and the 12-year-old. So I run downstairs and I separate them, put them both in the rooms. And so I go to the 12-year-old. I'm like, just tell me what happened. And so I did not really care what happened. I really wasn't going to do anything about what happened, but I knew it was important that they got to say, say their,
yes.
So Maggie's telling me what happened, and Naomi keeps popping out of her room, interrupting, like, that's not how it happened. I was like, girl, you're going to have a turn. Just chill it, okay? And then 2 seconds later, she's popping back out. So at one point I look at her and I said, it is not your turn. I love you. And I know that this is hard for you. And I need you to wait in your room. So she closes the door and then she starts pounding on the door, pounding. And I'm really focused in on the 12-year-old. So I'm not really paying attention to that. But then out of nowhere, the 10-year-old comes out and she looks like she's like this big. And she's like, Mama, I kicked a hole in the door. So inside my body, I was like, you did what? But outside of my body, I was like, ooh, you must have been really angry. Let's go in your room and talk about it, right? Luckily, I had eaten lunch. My resilient zone was real solid in that moment. So I did not rush to my fight energy. I could see that she was struggling. So I sat on the floor with her and I rubbed her back. And she was just, there was so much shame about what she had done. And when she finally got calm, I said, what's going on for you? And she's like, I don't know. I just can't think. And I said, it's 2:00. Have you eaten anything today? And she said, no, I haven't had anything since last night. That survival need of hunger, her brain went offline. A little thing became a big thing because her basic needs were not met. So that hunger that she was experiencing unsettled everything. And we had a blowout resulting in a broken door. So in that moment, like Michael said, of connecting first was, girl, I'm so sorry that happened. I know that you didn't mean to kick the door. You're not that kind of person. Let's go get a snack. And so we go upstairs and we eat lunch. And after lunch, we say, all right, so what are we going to do about this door? And so now with her online brain, she had a plan of how she was going to earn money to replace the door. So the discipline was still there. The learning was still there, but it could not come in the height of things. It would have been pouring gas on fire if I had gone into her room and did all the things about the door before supporting her and getting her nervous system calm. So finding ways to meet these needs in real time. Fun. It is okay if a kid is starting to lose it to say, let's redirect this to a game. Let's go play a game together. Let's watch a funny YouTube video together on the phone. Let's, giving them choices of, it sounds like you're having a really hard time right now. We can do this in here, or we can go in the room and color. Trying to redirect, putting those drops in the bucket for them when their brains are offline will settle nervous systems so that they can be online and learn and have a constructive connecting conversation. So when a kid's brain is offline, we want you to connect with them. We want you to try to fill one of these basic needs. And then we want to change the sensory environment through sensation. So that's the last one.
So with sensation, what we're talking about, because the only way, the only language that the survival system understands if a child is offline and things are going on is the language of sensation. What is sensation? So sensations are different than emotions. We know a child can be happy, angry, mad, upset. A child can be a lot of things when it comes to emotions. But how do we get a child to understand what sensations are? And that, because that's the only thing that our survival brain understands, the only language that it understands is sensation. So it's like the sensing in of certain sensations in the body. One of my favorite ones to use with my sons is either drinking some water or going for a walk and have them like sensing in on the sensation of what's going on with their legs, what's going on with their feet hitting the ground. When they sip the water, what's going on when you sip the water? Can you, is it cool? Is it warm? Is it hot? Let's sense in on what it's like when it touches your lips to the time it touches your tongue, to when it hits the back of your throat, going on your esophagus, all the way to your stomach. Let's feel that sensation. Let's kind of hone in on those sensations. And when they hone in on certain sensations, you mentioned that, okay, so first week the connection happened. Then you said, "Are you hungry? Let's go get something," so they can sense in on the taste of the food, sense in on what it feels like getting in their stomach. But even just sensing in on the thought of actually getting something in their stomach. Mm-hmm. It's those things that we want to like really teach I ain't gonna say teach our children. When we talk about healthy co-regulation, those are the things we want our children to pick up on from us. How we show up is how they'll show up. So when we talk about parenting in this day and time, when we're talking about sensations, it's what we sense in on, and then our children are quick to pick up. You said what is it? I'm a do before. What is it? Do what I say what I do, but do what I do. Yeah, something like that. But anyway, they're going to do what you do. And I noticed that my sons, when I show up like this, and I talk about my sons because they're 7 and 8. My daughter's 3, and
that's a whole different story.
Yeah, she ain't really trying to hear none of that right now. but when we teach them about sensations of how if they feel a lightness in their muscles, if they feel, an emptiness in their stomach from not eating, those things, so we can start to teach them how to sense in on those positive sensations. And when they sense in those positive sensations, the amygdala, those sensory inputs, what smells, what sounds, what feels safe, our amygdala goes back to like, okay, I'm safe now. And the brain can go here. And our children can be back online. And then that's when we can start correcting behaviors, things like that. But it's all about them learning what senses and sensations feel like in their bodies so that it can talk to the survival brain and they'll know that they're safe. It's always about them knowing that they're safe. And then we can see behaviors change. Now, that's individually and that's with systems as well.
Yeah. Individually
and with systems. It's time for us to start reassuring, and it's kind of hard. It's hard for me to do this, okay? Me raising, Black children, it's hard for me to say, the world is safe, but I would rather my sons understand the world is safe because they're with me most of the time and be here than them walking around in the grocery store here, okay? I just had to share that with you guys.
So the last slide tells us that there are actually 8 sensory systems in our body. It's not just the smell or the taste, touch, smell, sight, and sound that we thought about, or like that we first learned about. There's 3 more. One is our muscles and our joints and our ligaments, and it's called your proprioceptive system. And I think that the proprioceptive system gets more bang for your buck when somebody is offline. If we want to tell them that they are safe through sensation, pushing on a wall, lifting up something really heavy, will tell this nervous system that you're okay. Not only does it offload that gas pedal energy, like it gives that energy somewhere to go, but also like as you're pushing on the table, feeling how strong your arms are. As you're walking, like Michael said, noticing how my legs moving my body right now, the functions of that. The bicycle one represents your balance. That's another sensory system. It's your inner ear called vestibular. So if you ever like get on a swing, or kids that like to like circle around really, really fast and get dizzy, that's vestibular input. And then the stomach represents. But also, like as you're pushing on the table, feeling how strong your arms are. As you're walking, you just like close it out. Said,
okay, I'm trying. Okay.
The last one with the stomach up there is the interoceptive system, and that's the system that tells you when things go awry. Yeah. So, like us sitting here, we would.
How that just went awry.
But like, if you're all of a sudden you're hungry out of nowhere, like a switch flips and you realize you're hungry, that's your interoceptive system. Or a switch flips and you realize now I'm hot or now I'm cold, whereas before I didn't have an awareness about my temperature. This also is like gut reactions, like if you have butterflies in your stomach or feel like you've been punched in the gut or something, that's a internal knowing that something needs to be explored in my environment about whether or not it's safe.
Right.
And one of the things I like to notice about why sensations work to bring our brain back online is that the brain went offline because sensation told us we were not safe. Maybe it was a dog barking and you've been bit by a dog before. Maybe it was the smell of toast and something awful happened to you when you were younger when toast was being
slamming at the door.
Yeah. And so when the door slams, the system says not safe. But then when you take positive or neutral information, it says, oh, wait a minute, false alarm. I am safe. I'm actually right here, right now, not reliving this traumatic thing that's happened in the past, but right here, right now, I have messages of safety through sensation. So it's really cool. So when kids' behaviors, trauma responsiveness means responding to the trauma. What brought a kid to an offline response? So trauma is all the things we've talked about. We've talked about, racism and economic oppression and COVID-19 and bullying. That's all trauma. Also, the uneasiness, like not knowing what's going to happen next, when that keeps going, can be traumatic.
Yeah, watching your parents freak out
can be traumatic.
Very traumatic, because it's like when the people that you trust the most and you're looking for to take care of you are offline and freaking out, that's a scary feeling. That's a very scary feeling.
Right. And when I am, as a mama, am offline, I'm not available to connect with my kids. I'm not in my thinking brain. All the things that I know from all my experience and training are not available to me if I'm offline. So of all the things I think we would say today is your nervous system and giving, it's not just self-care. It's you have to care for yourself when you're parenting a child who's experienced trauma. And in today's world, that's every kid.
Yeah.
To some extent has experienced an event that has activated their nervous system, that has told them that they're not safe. And so it's important to keep yourself as grounded as possible so that you're online as much as possible so that you can respond with connection or meeting basic needs or changing the sensory environment for your kids.
Yeah, because from TikTok to Facebook to Instagram to regular television and movies, kids are constantly being bombarded with everything that's going on right now. And it's like, well, my kid doesn't watch TV, or, I make sure that these things don't happen. But if your kid's interacting with anybody else, there's a lot of things that's going to affect them. And unless you really sit down and conversate with your kids on a semi-regular basis and see what's going on in their little world, something that they saw or experienced might really have had a traumatic effect, and you don't know it because you're not investing that time to sit down with them and see what's going on in their little worlds, and giving them also the opportunity to ask questions. That's one of the most important things you can do, is give your kids the opportunity to ask questions. And it's okay to say, I don't know, but together we're going to go and find out the answer to the questions that you're asking. That makes them feel better than you just telling them anything, and it turns out not to be true. So then, because that's creating another whole monster. So, and it's okay as a parent not to know sometimes. But it's also important that you let your children know, well, I don't know right now, but together we can find out. And that makes the kid feel important about themselves. And it actually makes them feel like, wow, I helped mom or I helped dad figure this out. And it makes them feel good about themselves and helps them build their self-esteem.
Dropping that power bucket.
So I'm going to leave with this. Without vulnerability, there can be no connection. with vulnerability, you enhance the connection. So as vulnerable as you are with your friends and, y'all good, show that same vulnerability with our children and watch what happens. Watch how they start to react. And like I said, the way we show up, it's the way our children will show up. Co-regulation, healthy co-regulation, it's the key to this whole deal, man. And thank you all for allowing us to be with you all today.
Right. And please do not tell your little boys that they are not allowed to cry.
You're here.
Thank you for throwing that in, Alice. This has been so wonderful. Thank you, Michael, Alice, and Allison. I mean, this is just such a powerful learning tool that you've just created for all kinds of families. You've been getting a lot of love in the YouTube chat. I hope you'll go back at some point and look at all the love that you're getting, all the affirmation that you're getting, all the people that have said how helpful and important this is. And I wonder if I can just ask one question, because we really pitch this to families. But while I was listening to you all talk, I think how much teachers need this information. And I think about all the data that shows the different ways that Black, Indigenous people, children of color bear the brunt of the kind of norms that are brought to discipline in schools, especially with the criminalization of behavior. And I just wonder if you have anything to add in about teachers. I mean, teachers have incredible stress, but they've also been formed by a system that has increasingly criminalized the behavior you all are talking about that comes from trauma and stress. And I don't know if you all have anything to add on that wouldn't take another hour and a half to unpack.
Well, that'll be part 2.
Yeah.
Coming in.
But I'm gonna drop a little bit of just a little bit. So, and I'm gonna put this out there so teachers can really understand. We have our primary attachments, which is our parents, those who are raising us, in whatever capacity. But as a secondary attachment, teachers, bus drivers, the cafeteria lady, those people that our children see on a regular basis, you have this great opportunity to be the it's bigger than just secondary attachment. You have this opportunity to actually enhance a child's life by your actions with them, by your, so the way you show up, if there's this opportunity to be a buffer for a child with their childhood experiences, especially if they're adverse, or if there's some trauma or some stressors or some things going on, and you're that buffer, you have created a connection that can actually elevate a child to a very high level, okay? Right. But at the same time, if you choose to treat a child who is of a different color, or, specifically, we know that the preschool to prison pipeline is a real thing. If you don't know, please do some studying on that. Yeah. But teachers, you have this innate ability to kind of change that whole system by the way you show up and by the things that, teachers choose to learn, and also understanding that, okay, some of our young people, some of our children of color, some of our children from the Hispanic population, from our children from the Black population, they might have just a little bit more traumas or, stressors going on in their lives that will have them showing up to school like this. And what looks like behavior is not culture, it's not behavior, it's just a trauma response. Yes. So what we need to do is work on being that secondary attachment and having that connection with our children to bring them here first. And even if there's behavior that we need to correct, get them here first, create that connection, then go with that correction, and then see what can happen from there, instead of everything being punitive, instead of everything being, I'm going to punish, I'm going to punish, I'm going to punish. Our children are here a lot of times. And that's just from walking outside of their front doors. They get here. And I know that because I see that. Okay, Allison, go ahead.
I want to also offer, in order for us to do what Michael is talking about, of being online secondary attachments, especially so I'm talking to white teachers right now, that understanding, why do we think that Black children's behavior is more aggressive than white children's? when you really step back and you look at it objectively, they're very similar behaviors, but we criminalize one over the other. One's normal, one's aggressive. And that is about our amygdalas and what we have been told through media, through policies, through our own personal experience. Our amygdala is where we hold bias. And so if I have been told, and if my amygdala believes that a 5-year-old Black child bouncing around the room is dangerous, if my amygdala believes that to be true, I will respond to that from this place. And so that means that dismantling systems of white supremacy within ourselves is trauma responsive work. You cannot separate the work of racial equity and racial justice from trauma responsiveness. They go together. And so reforming our neural pathways around behavior is one step to responding from here. When children are misbehaving, any child is misbehaving. In order for me to see that, my amygdala has to see it for what it is, a child struggling in a moment, not anything more than that.
That's such a powerful statement. Such a powerful statement that you just made. That this trauma responsiveness, this trauma informed practice, is the work of dismantling white supremacy and addressing systemic racism. And I can't thank you all enough for just all the wisdom, the medicine, the generosity of spirit, the personal stories, your own vulnerability. And I think you've given all of us so many new tools and so much new equipment and framing that you've just done so much to dismantle white supremacy just in this time together. And this, for everyone watching, this is available on Grace Covenant's YouTube channel for you to use. And I know that Michael and Alice and Allison are also available at other times. They do all kinds of wonderful work in our community, and they are generous enough to offer a space right now. If you're watching live on Zoom, there are 2 places in the chat where you can see those Zoom connections. Michael and Alice will be available in Zoom Room 1 for those parenting in conditions of oppression. And Allison will be available in Zoom Room 2 for those who understand themselves as parenting in conditions of privilege. They're there just to be in conversation, because this was a lot. And I know even for me at different times, as someone who is a survivor of violence, a few times I got really activated and I just had feelings in my body and sadness for the support I didn't get. And so I know that things are coming up for everybody. And I want us to all just take a deep breath and just really have gratitude for the fact that we have Michael and Allison and other amazing people in our community that are creating conditions for support, for healing, for true connection. And so I thank you all for that. And I thank everyone who's tuned in today, this afternoon. And I do look forward to part 2. I hear you, Alice. I'm going to take you up on that. Part 2 needs to happen.
I think we really need to take a deeper dive into some of these things we're talking about. Because, I mean, the surface is a wonderful place to, hang out and do little cute things. But we got to take a deeper dive because it's affecting everyone. The systemic racism in this country is really affecting everybody on every level. And so it's imperative that we all start educating ourselves. That's like, honestly, I'm learning a lot more about the traumas that white people experience than I ever thought about, because I was so busy not busy, but I was so oppressed by the system. I didn't have time to notice or pay attention to the fact that white people had traumas too, because that's where
Yeah.
my oppression was coming from. But that's like, I also realized hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
So if you're hurt,
Yeah.
you're going to hurt somebody else. So the oppression that I'm feeling is coming from non-people of color, hurt people, regurgitating that onto me. So we have a
Yes.
lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do.
Yes, and I do hope we can continue the conversation. I think there's so much there around the callousness that white culture teaches us, and that does harm to our humanity.
Yeah.
So I'm already excited about next time. I hope we can. And I want to remind anyone who's going to join us on our Zoom rooms that the password is 789. That's Grace Covenant street address. 789 is the password to get into those Zoom rooms. So once again, Michael, Allison, my deep gratitude, and I know the gratitude of many are surrounding you now. Thank you so much, and good afternoon to everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.